Most histories will tell you the Katyusha was a symbol of Soviet mass, of crude but overwhelming firepower. That is the surface truth. But the deeper, more consequential story is that the Katyusha was not merely a weapon, but a systemic shock to the very architecture of modern warfare, delivered from the brink of collapse. By the summer of 1941, the Red Army was shattered. The German blitzkrieg had annihilated whole fronts, encircling armies measured in the millions. Conventional artillery, the king of battlefield firepower, was being captured or abandoned by the regiment. In this catastrophic deficit, a surplus idea was born, a weapon that traded precision for terrifying saturation and logistical complexity for brutal simplicity. The Katyusha wasn't just built to fight the Wehrmacht. It was built to survive it. To understand its true impact, we must look past the iconic barrage and see it for what it was: a desperate, ingenious solution to the problem of fighting a war after you've already lost your war machine. It emerged not from triumph, but from a profound scarcity of everything but time. The development of the BM-13, the system that would become Katyusha, began not in 1941, but in the late 1930s, in the shadow of Stalin's purges, which had devastated the Soviet officer corps. Its proponents, like the innovative artillery officer Vladimir Barmin, weren't just designing a new launcher, they were designing around critical weaknesses. The Soviet Union lacked the fine-tooled industry for vast numbers of complex long-range artillery pieces and their precision optics. What it could produce was robust truck chassis and simple, solid propellant rockets. The system's genius was in its platform independence. It could be and was mounted on trucks, tanks, even river barges and sledges. This wasn't versatility for its own sake. It was survivability. When the front line collapsed, a Katyusha battery could hitch its launcher racks to any available vehicle and displace in minutes, long before enemy counter-battery fire, the deadliest threat to traditional artillery could find it. It was a weapon system built for a war of movement and retreat, a reality its designers grimly anticipated. The psychological effect was not a bonus, it was a calculated component of its lethality. Western observers later dubbed it Stalin's organ for its pipe-like appearance. The Germans called it the Stalin orgel, but their reports speak of Roosevelt's organ as well, a nod to Lend-Lease Studebaker trucks that carried it. This confusion itself was a tactical victory, but the name fails to capture the experience. A battalion of conventional howitzers fires in a staggered rhythm. The Katyusha delivered its entire payload, up to 48 132mm rockets, in a matter of 7 to 10 seconds. The sound was not a boom, but a screaming, rippling wall of noise that tore apart the air before the high-explosive fragmentation warheads even impacted. For troops under this barrage, there was no warning whistle, no time to dive for a specific shell crater. The world simply erupted simultaneously across an entire grid square. This overpressure of noise and destruction induced a unique form of shock, paralyzing units not just through physical damage but through sheer sensory annihilation. It was area denial weaponized as psychological trauma. Its operational doctrine was, honestly, a lesson in centralized scarcity and decentralized execution. The Soviets did not scatter Katyushas across the front. Instead, they were a strategic asset, held at the front or army level and doled out to reinforce critical breakthroughs, or, shore up catastrophic defenses. A Guards mortar unit, as they were officially named, reported not to the local artillery commander, but directly to the highest headquarters in the sector. This centralized control ensured the weapon's unique shock effect wasn't wasted on minor actions. But once committed, its employment was, brutally straightforward. There was no complex fire direction center calculating individual gun trajectories. Coordinates were plotted, the launchers were crudely aimed in azimuth, and the ripple fire commenced. This meant it was ineffective against point targets, a lesson hard learned by survivors trying to use it against fortified bunkers. Its purpose was to prepare an area, to break up infantry formations, destroy soft-skinned vehicles, and most crucially, shatter morale before an assault. It was the sledgehammer, not the scalpel. The logistical footprint really reveals a different kind of vulnerability. For all its frontline simplicity, the Katyusha created a complex tale. A single battery salvo consumed over 2 tons of explosives and propellant in under 10 seconds. Reloading was a manual, exposed and time-consuming process, leaving the battery incredibly vulnerable. This created a signature tactical rhythm, a sudden devastating strike, followed by a prolonged period of flight and concealment while the battery relocated and resupplied. German shock troops learned to listen for that silence and attack aggressively in its wake. Furthermore, the rockets themselves were, well, notoriously inaccurate by artillery standards. Their dispersion was a feature for saturation, but it made the weapon horribly wasteful of ammunition and, honestly, dangerous to use near one's own troops, a fact that led to several tragic instances of friendly fire. The system traded the sustained, precise pressure of tube artillery for a brief, uncontrollable outburst of violence. It was a predator that had to hide after it struck. The legacy it left is etched in modern doctrine for both armies and insurgents. The Katyusha did not win the war, but it solved a specific, desperate problem of industrialized attrition warfare. Its true progeny is not in modern Western multiple-launch rocket systems, which are precision-guided and hyper-accurate. Its lineage runs through the ad hoc rocket systems of non-state actors and developing armies. The crude truck-mounted rockets used in regional conflicts are the direct conceptual descendants of the Katyusha. Inexpensive, easy to manufacture and operate, mobile and imbued with a psychological terror far beyond their destructive cost. The Katyusha proved that a weapon doesn't need to be accurate to be decisive. It needs to be unignorable. It demonstrated that in a conflict where you cannot compete with your enemy's technical finesse, you can overwhelm his nervous system through sheer concentrated chaos. The story of the Katyusha, then, is not a simple tale of Soviet might. It is a case study in asymmetrical innovation born of existential threat. It reminds us that the most formidable tools of war are often forged in the furnace of perceived weakness, designed not to fight the war you want, but the war you are actually losing. It asks us to look beyond the spectacular fireball and understand the harsh logistics, the calculated trade-offs, and the brutal pragmatism that define survival on and off the battlefield. These overlooked realities, the why behind the weapon, are what teach us how conflicts are truly shaped and how fragile the edge of technological superiority can be. If you value this depth of analysis, this focus on the consequential mechanics behind historical events, then you belong here. Subscribe to War Machina for more content that bypasses the summary to examine the substance. Share this video if you know others who seek a deeper understanding.